Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Kathleen Ehlers, and today is Tuesday, April 25th, and it being 6:02, I'm going to open this meeting for the Finance Subcommittee. We're gathered here at the George Romm Little Theater at Brockton High School, and now I would like to establish a quorum. So, Ms. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Homer?
Here.
Ms. Rivas-Mendez?
Here.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan is absent at this time, and Kathy Ehlers, I'm here as the vice chair. So tonight for the Finance Committee, we have one major topic to discuss, and that's the fiscal year 24 budget. And I'd like to welcome Chris Correa to the floor to walk us through what has been discussed and where we are at this point. So Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I will be presenting the proposed FY24 budget. Aldo apologizes that he couldn't be here today, but he's training for the Tough Mudder in Vermont, so he needs some time to train. So, as you all know, the district's student enrollment's been on a steady decline for the past several years. We've been hopeful that through multiple marketing campaigns, we were able to increase those enrollment numbers. Unfortunately, that has not come to fruition, and we now need to realign our staffing levels to meet our enrollment figures. So if you refer to the handout, the blue handout, this shows our enrollment throughout the years in comparison to our staffing levels. Now, if you look at 2019, since 2019 to current, we are down nearly 1,400 students. But our staffing levels have gone up by 385. BA alone has increased by 224 during that same period. So we really need to focus. The time has come that we really need to realign our staffing levels. It's not sustainable for the district to go on in this direction.
Thank you, Chris. So, Chris and Aldo last year really encouraged me to cut up to 100 positions last year of certified staff. And I didn't do that. I didn't recommend that to the school committee. I was rolling the dice, hoping that, two reasons. Number one is we're coming out of very tough times with COVID. We struggled, obviously, from when hybrid to full remote to hybrid to in-person, and then, then going into last year knowing we're going to be full in-person, I didn't think it was right at that time to cut staff. We did, I think, about 25 positions through attrition and retirements. And pretty much I rolled the dice hoping that our enrollment would increase. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. I think this year we lost another 383 kids.
Correct.
And I've been superintendent from 2019 to 2023, and I was thrilled to add, and don't apologize for adding the staff that we needed to add to support our students during a very difficult time. I added 383 total staff members, and 224 of them BEA, and positions that I felt was needed. And unfortunately, the decline in our enrollment has not gotten better. It keeps in the trend, keeps showing it going down, and it doesn't look like it's going to go up again, at least for another couple of years. So this is where we lie with, and you still have, again, and you all settled, rightfully so, collective bargaining agreements with our unions, and bargain in good faith, and So those increases too, obviously come up. And, with that and the drop of enrollment, and it just, like Chris said, we have to figure out how we align so we don't have to do any more reductions, and we can then hopefully add people back when enrollments start going up. But again, I was encouraged last year to cut up to 100, and we ended up cutting about 25 through attrition. I just think it was not good to have to cut people during the times we've been in, but I rolled the dice with enrollment, and unfortunately went down and not up.
Yep. And now going forward, this budget that Aldo and I put together, this will carry us through the next 4 to 5 years. So we should be stable for the next 4 to 5 years with the increase, with the continuing in SOA funding, and hopefully we can get our low income percentage up to increase our reimbursement there. So we're hopeful that we can get things back in line, but we need to stay steadfast and reduce these staffing levels.
So really quick, the realignment in terms of, obviously enrollment's going down, hiring's up. Where does that leave us with programs?
So we were sure not to touch any programs. There are no reductions in any programs across the district. This is our main issue, our staffing levels, and that's what we're focusing on.
And so the mindset is realign the budget. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Realign the budget, stabilize the budget, or I should say balance the budget, and then this allows us to have stability for the next 4 to 5 years, correct?
Correct.
And it's just, unfortunately this year, the House budget just came out the week before vacation, hoping we would see, an increase where we didn't really see anything other than they're going to try to put money in the out-of-district costs when we have to send students out of district. So that's still up in the air. And then the other one is we were hoping that we were short 69 students from going to group 11 to group 12. That's what Chris was talking about. We were at 79.6%, 79.6% of low income. You need
Yes.
to be at 80% to be in group 12, which would have brought us another 6.8 million. So we were hoping that in the House budget would make some adjustments. We talked to Desi, we talked to a lot of people with the help of the mayor to see if we could somehow, they would round up. And, we had 69 students we were short by.
Or at least set up a pothole fund or an earmark
Something,
for
yeah.
us, but nothing's come to fruition at this point, but we're still working.
Okay, I want to open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions? I'm sure you do. It's a lot of information that you're looking at. Mr. Mayor?
Vice Chair, good evening, everybody. I just want to make it clear, Troy Claxon, the CFO on the city side, all the Petronio and Chris on the school side, and Mike and I have been meeting 2 months now, maybe even 2.5 months relative to the budget forecast. We don't take this lightly in any way. Any loss of job has a detrimental impact on that person, that person's family, Brockton Public Schools as a whole. The enrollment itself is an issue. It's not unique to Brockton, but it's an issue. We did believe, rightfully I think at the time, that there would be a rebound once we came back from remote learning and COVID. Hasn't panned out quite yet. So I am working diligently with Troy to be able to come up with some hard numbers. A lot of these are pretty close to being final. They're not necessarily final quite yet. When Aldo comes back, Troy and Chris and I and Mike will meet again. We met with the vice chair as well today, but I just want to make it clear to everybody that one thing is we've always said we don't want to have any cuts in programs like in the past. In the past we cut all middle school sports and all extracurricular. We're not doing that, but I just wanted to really reiterate again how the forecast was the forecast, and the repivot and the repurposing right now is something that we are taking to heart. We also know that Desi had indicated to us, to Brockton Public Schools, that we needed to bring on more administration. And I know some people, question that, but at the end of the day, we do have an MOU with Desi to try to do some rebounding. And, we're going to continue until the very last second to work with the House and the Senate. Jerry Cassidy, Rita Mendez, Michelle Dubois on the House side, and Mike Brady on the Senate. We are really being penalized right now. $6.8 million is a big hit right now. If they had rounded up, the 6.8 would have been a savior for all of us. I was on a call with all the gateway communities the other day as well to talk about different budgeting formulas. So we'll just have to see what the final numbers are going to be right now. But, due to the efforts of Chris and Troy and Aldo, I think these are pretty close to being final.
And just so people know, with the number of reductions, like, there will be $1 million of cuts in administration through attrition and still some elimination of positions. And also, there'll be a lot, before we, look at classroom numbers, there'll be also realignment of some administrative positions to make sure that we're all doing everything that we can do and everybody fills their time every day. I'm not talking about classroom teachers, I'm talking about administration. So as we go through, when you see 150 required reduction in certified staff, that's not all classroom teachers.
Questions? I do want to make one comment, and I know that this information may not be in your packet, but when in one of our previous packets, we get an update on monthly enrollment. And one of the things that I did not understand until today was the difference in revenue for for kindergarten versus pre-K versus matriculated students, and the fact that it can be a little deceiving that it looks like the student head count is up or not that far off, but the revenue is. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our biggest increase in enrollment is pre-K, which is a really good thing. The unfortunate thing, and about half that number, full-day pre-K, which you do get full reimbursement for, but half-day pre-K, which is a majority of the students, we're up 306, but only about half that full day, and so the half-day you only get half funding for. And pre-K classrooms are expensive to run because it requires a teacher, at least 2 paras. If it's a pre-K class with students with disabilities, it could be 3 paras, depending on the needs of the child. So the state has not come through with their promise of universal pre-K to fully fund it. I mean, if we were being funded fully for all pre-K students, we would be able to open more classrooms, but that's unfortunately it's not the case. So our numbers have grown in pre-K, but unfortunately K to 12, where you get full reimbursement, is down. I mean, Brockton High is seeing its lowest number since the late 90s. We're down to about 3,500 students at Brockton High School, and it's, again, we really have to continue to focus on getting kids to come back from private schools, from charter schools, and that's something when we visited Springfield a couple of weeks ago, we were talking to the superintendent, and he's dealing with the same issue. It's just, the enrollment's dropping. And, a good thing for the city is that housing costs are up. I mean, it was an article in the Globe I read this weekend, and they were saying, up and growing communities, Brockton was listed as the #1 in the South Shore because of, it's just a good place to be. But house prices and rents are way up, and we exit interviews with families who leave. A lot of them are heading more south, New Bedford, Fall River. They're seeing an increase in their enrollment because I think their house prices are lower, rents are lower. So it's unfortunate because we've seen an increase of 125% of homeless students, and that's another issue. When the moratorium on evictions went away, we're seeing a big increase, and that's never fully funded because that transportation cost is out of control, and that's not fully funded, so we have to pick up that transportation cost when a student gets placed in a home outside of Brockton, but they're a Brockton student. They get to stay in Brockton as a student, and it's up to the district under McKinney-Vento, which is a federal law, to transport them every day back to. And our transportation department just isn't big enough now to do that kind of. We do all the in-city transportation and field trips, but we just don't have the capacity yet. We're building it, but we just have the capacity to make those. We still have to contract out for those transportation services.
And the increase of homeless students, I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago, how it's like 69, 68. If we can bridge that gap, are we still eligible to pull in that 6 million plus? Like if we can do that by the end of the year, or are those funds gone?
No, they use the October 1st. So on October
Gotcha.
1st, we were 69 students short of
Gotcha.
being in group 12.
That's something we could work on for next year, for this October 1st,
I
correct?
believe with the help of Janice Plumer, our outreach SNAP coordinator, I believe that we'll meet that.
I think she
80%.
grew it almost 15% in 1 year.
Correct. Yep, but so I'm confident that she can
Janice
hit that 80.
visits churches, community centers, to explain to people that they have to be connected to SNAP benefits or food stamps or things, assistance,
Yeah.
to be considered low income. Unfortunately, the state doesn't, the paperwork, if they're not connected to one of those programs, the paperwork they make parents fill out is, I don't know, about 12 pages long.
Yeah.
And, some families, have illegal status, so they don't want to fill out the paperwork, and absolutely, obviously. And so, that causes our numbers to be lower, and we know we have more. There's more than 69 students that are low income. I mean, we probably have 1,000 that are in our schools that are low income, that's just not being counted because of the way DESE counts those.
I think I'm looking at the 6 million plus, because if you look at the first page of the report, and Chris, this is more detail than than I've seen since I've been on the board. I mean, this is like every line item that we've been kind of asking for, so thank you for
Yeah.
the transparency and
So
the detail.
So Aldo and I did rebuild the budget, and we wanted to make the budget as transparent as possible, add as much detail as possible, to not lend itself to multiple questions, you know what I mean? So, and I'm happy to go page by page with everyone, so if that's what you'd like to do.
Well, the first thing I was going to point out is, the most obvious to me is we're out of ESSER funds. And so the 6 million from the low income and the 6 million without having ESSER, which we benefited from last year, that's also what we're trying to make up. That's a piece of it as well. But I'm going to throw this to my colleagues on the floor and see if they would like for you to start and go page by page. That's totally up to everyone here. I think I'm getting a yes, so if you'd like to.
Just to stay on staffing for a minute, so.
Sure.
We have a May 15th deadline for BEA and a
Yep.
June 1st for all others. So again, this is, a work in progress, and we've done this the years we've had a cut. I mean, we've done it all the way to the end of June to, try to do our best to see if more revenue's coming in, and,
Yeah.
but you just can't deny the enrollment numbers, which is unfortunate.
Agreed. So I would say, Chris, if you don't mind just kind of bringing us through the highlights so that,
Judy had a question.
oh, I'm so sorry. Ms. Sullivan?
I was just going to make a comment about possibly bringing back students to Brockton High. I think the early college program might do that, because I don't know if anybody knows, but when New Heights Charter School was formed, they were given early college by the state and we weren't. So I know loads of kids that went over there for that reason. So us bringing early college here, could bring back a lot of students to Brockton High, hopefully, in the middle schools.
Yeah, exactly.
And New Heights is at capacity, correct?
Yeah, so that's what I was hoping that, like last year when I hedged my bets on staffing, because they're at capacity, I was hoping that, okay, there's no more there, but hopefully we'll see now an increase in enrollment because they went to capacity, but it's just, a lot of families moving more south, and a lot stayed in private schools when they left us during COVID, because they wanted that in-person experience, and, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of them just haven't come back.
Any other questions? All right, Chris, I would say just pick the highlights. I mean, this is a big packet for us to go through, but for the most part, just pick the highlights so that everybody kind of understands how you and Aldo put this together and to follow along.
No problem.
Sure.
Okay. So I think if we look at the first page, that kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. It summarizes everything. So it's our preliminary proposed budget. As the mayor suggested, our total aid figure has not been confirmed. So Troy, myself, and Aldo, and the superintendent, as well as the mayor, we're still working on firming up those figures, but we're confident that we're right around this number. So currently, we're proposing $219.8 million in revenue from the city, $7.3 million in title and sped grants, as well as $2 million in circuit breaker, which would bring our total revenues to $229 million. Our expenses, $168 million for certified staff, $40 million for non-certified staff, and $38 million for ordinary maintenance. Now, we are running currently an $18 million deficit. So my proposed realignments would be 150 required reductions in certified FTEs, as well as 112 required reductions in non-certified FTEs, along with $2 million in OM reductions, which that will bring us to a balanced budget of $229,168,000 for net school spending. And below is the non-net figure, which comprises, obviously, the transportation department. We are balanced at $16.2 million. Any questions on the proposed budget?
Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. When you say, the 150 required in the FTEs and 112, is that being divided, or are you including that both together? So we're looking at number of 262
Correct.
overall?
Correct.
Thank you.
Next page is our local aid estimates. As the superintendent stated, unfortunately, the House did not come in with a higher aid package, so we stayed level funded at $241 million, but overall, our funding increased by $13.2 million from the state. And the next page is, again, what Aldo presented, it's just our allocations by department. At the top, you have BEA at $145 million, administration at 11.7, and then in the middle, you have your non-certified staff, which includes paras at 13.5, custodians at 10.2, and then below are all your OM items. So here starts, so what Aldo and I did, we separated out all the unions, and we broke down all their pays, which again is a little more transparent, and you'll see how it all comes together, instead of just lumping it all in one number. So the first page, on page 1, you have your BEA salaries. At the top, you have BEA salaries at $137 million, and then we break out the longevity, supplemental longevity, stipends, buybacks, so on and so forth. These are all your contractual pays, which would give you a total of $145.6 million in BEA salaries alone.
Wow.
Next page is additional personnel. Now, again, we don't know in the course of a year, there are a lot of changes that happen. So we do fund for certified staff and non-certified staff for any unknown positions that will be added during the course of the year. Page 3, summer employment. Now, again, for transparency reasons, we broke everything out of, so we were noticing, Aldo and I, additional comp forms coming through left and right, and we had no idea what they were for. So we reached out to all the departments, sat down with them, and then broke it all out. So that way, we have a true picture of where we're at, so we have no more surprises. So, and this just breaks out all the summer employment, the SPED summer preschool program, Edison Academy summer program, technology. These are when we bring in some students to help out for the start of the school year, to clean out computers, get everything up and running for the school, for the new school year. I'll just continue, just stop me whenever anybody
Yeah,
has any questions.
no, that sounds great.
Next page, page 4, your part-time employment. This consists of all your substitute teachers, classroom substitute teachers, long-term subs, permanent, and building subs, for a total of $2.9 million. Page 5A, part-time employment. This includes translation services for the bilingual department, ELL requirements, website maintenance, morning and afternoon school bus coverage at all of the schools, as well as home teaching services for SPED, system-wide. (5B), continued part-time employment. This breaks it out by school level. You have middle school. Under middle school, you have guidance programs, after-school programs, Brockton High School, career
Wow,
and technical.
you even have the Thanksgiving football game coverage in here.
Yeah. I'm telling you, every little thing. You'd be amazed how it adds up very, very fast. And we really need to get a handle on this. And again, like when it comes time to reallocate our resources and realign our staffing levels, it's the worst job to really write out those pink slips. You know, I don't like to see anybody lose their job. So, and that's another reason why it took us longer to develop this budget. You know, we wanted to make sure that these reductions, these 262 positions, was a real number. Not like in years past where you throw out a number and we hope that's gonna, that'll stick. This is a real number, and we took time to make sure and analyze these figures, that these are real figures. This is real.
Well, I don't want to speak for my peers, but I know that before we make a decision like that with those people, I would want to make sure that we've exhausted every opportunity to prevent that. And I think the transparency of this allows for us to ask questions and see that we've exhausted or tried to exhaust all options to try to get there.
Again, that's, again, on this same page, why I went into detail, like for instance, on item number 1, guidance programs, we locked down the hours and the rate, so we know there's no variance there, there's no room. Like, that's the budget. Page 6, intramural programs, broken out by elementary, middle school, and the high schools. Again, in great detail, under the high school, you have 4 instructors at 4 sessions, 40 hours, at $37.97 an hour. Page 7A, extracurricular activities. Each middle school receives $10,000. The champion, you'll notice, is a 0, but we reallocated that at the bottom.
Chris, what does the 1 mean?
It's a placeholder. So these may not currently be active groups.
Right now, they're not active.
Okay.
But we want to keep $1 just in case, maybe during the course of the year, they want to reintroduce that program.
Okay.
So. again, page 7B is just a continuation of all the extracurricular activities. And extracurricular activities also continues on 7C. And as you notice, when you look towards the bottom of page 7C, you notice that Champion School on the first, at the beginning of the extracurricular was 0. We give them $20,000 under other. Page 8 is the athletic program. Breaks it under your personal services, your ordinary maintenance, and then at the bottom, the 2 programs, the Huddle program, which is our recruiting portal, and the TB12 program, which is a health and wellness program.
That's only 9,000?
Correct. This was, Mike,
Yeah, it was Tom Brady called the TB12 CEO, who was a Massachusetts resident, and when he saw the riots happen during the George Floyd murder, he saw them on national TV, and he called and said, I want to do something for Brockton, so can you have, you know, the kids, bring the kids to TB12 in Foxborough, and so I think there's about 20 to 30 kids go there once a week.
Right.
And so we pretty much, that 9,000 is pretty much for the transportation. They don't charge us for services.
Wow, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Chris. I just-
that's okay. Next page, page 9, is professional and curriculum development, broken out into salaries, steering committees, as well as curriculum projects and memberships. Page 10 is a breakdown of administration, which includes principals, administration system-wide, as well as department heads. This constitutes for less than 5% of the overall budget in the district. Next page, page 11, is school committee. This is where we can make a lot of cuts, likely, so we'll look at that. Page 12, workers' compensation and unemployment. At the top, administrative assistants, custodians, paras, MTAs, lunch aides are all covered by the budget, the net school budget. The cafeteria employees are picked up by the lunch revolving account. And one thing I'd like to highlight, what we're proposing for unemployment compensation is $800,000, but we're still analyzing. We believe that may have to increase, possibly maybe to 1.2 million. We know that there are a lot of job opportunities out there, but, you know, when individuals do lose their jobs, they may want to reevaluate what they want to do. They may take a little more time of where they want to go. So I think I may want to add a little more money to that line item, but I just want to put that out there now. It's kind of a placeholder right now, so. Page 13. This is a breakdown of all administrative assistants and technicians. Again, just like we did in the BEA, you have the base pay, longevity, overtime, additional compensation, severance, sick of vacation, buyback, and then we break out the Edison Academy as well. Page 14, paraprofessionals, the same. It's break down all the same way as the admins and BEA. Continue to MTAs on page 15, custodians on 16, school police on 17, Attendance supervisors, 18. Bilingual facilitators on page 19, and mentors on 20.
Is there opportunity with the community mentors in terms of that number?
Yeah, because they're in the non-certified, that'll be part of their non-certified reduction.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Moving on, we're projecting $250,000 for non-certified retirements.
Chris, that's their sick time and,
Yeah, so those would be severances for.
yeah, for the
Yeah,
vacation
yep,
and sick, okay.
correct. So that number's fluid. That's just we do an analysis. That's where it usually ranges around $250,000. Okay, so this, even though we broke down all the longevities per page, we just really wanted to list all the longevities, all the non-certified longevities, the admins, paras, MTAs, custodians, school police, principals, administration, and non-union. Page 23 is a breakdown of non-certified contractual buybacks. It includes sick and vacation buybacks for all non-certified. Page 24 is a list of all instructional supplies by location. So what we will be doing going forward, normally in the past, we've given each school their own budget. They've controlled their own budget, okay? We've noticed in the past, this past year, when we froze the budget, certain departments and schools took it upon themselves to ignore that order and just continued to began a buying frenzy on Amazon. So I think controlling this budget internally under the financial services, they will need to come to financial services whenever they need to request supplies.
So the issue here is that, and during the summer, I'll have the principals, I spend a lot of time walking around schools and there's storage closets everywhere packed with stuff. And we have to make sure we're using what we already have and what we already bought before we just continue just to keep buying. I remember a few years when I became, I don't know, operations, I went into a closet and there was about 4.5 million paper clips and another 2 million rubber bands and pens that were all dried out because they were never used, still in the box. So it's just basically we got to figure out, like, we're not buying anything else until we figure out what we have, because there's just a lot of stuff, and all of us school people are hoarders. But stuff has to be used, so we don't want to be buying anything new unless it's going to be used. And also, we want to make sure when the schools get the money, they're using it for something that classroom teachers need. And that's important too, because we hear all the time and, how much teachers spend out of pocket for their own supplies and those things. So, how much of that we can offset and use that money for things that are being used in the classroom every day rather than stuff that sits in a closet. So it's a summer job to go through and see what we have, and instead of continue to just let people buy and give them a budget to figure it out. And as you see, when it gets close to the end of the year, the POs or the orders start flying in. It's like, if you went all year without this, why are you buying it now? So
I can't
And again, we want to
disagree.
and again, we want to give all the schools the tools that they need to succeed. That's not, it's not about saying no, but,
There has to be
You just
quality
know-
control.
well, yes, and that's, we do, and we review, but sometimes things get through, and some of the items that I've been noticing are questionable. So I think having a strong control on this is the right way to go.
And I also think for those of us that are on the accounts review committee, when we're going through the POs, there's usually the question, to your point, Superintendent, is this a need or is it a want? Big difference. And so, and right now where we have a freeze, it's one of those things where one of the concerns I had, and I'm sure some of my colleagues did, is if you have it, to your point, if you have it in the budget and you haven't used it all year, why is this mad dash of trying to use up all of that money just because you're going to lose it? And I understand from their point of view, but the reality is, then we're buying another 4 million paper clips just because we don't want to lose the money that's on the table. And and I do like the idea of inventorying what we have. Especially with the cost of paper, especially with the cost of toner. Like, there's so many high ticket, items.
Over the years, when I was into operations, we took a lot of in the old days, the school itself would have to buy their own paper, buy their own furniture. And that now is a district function, because I'm like, the money you get should be used for classroom materials and activities for kids and or curriculum that's needed, and not so furniture, paper, that was all brought to central, so they wouldn't have to spend time, number one, doing it and taking that out of their budget that could have went towards materials.
So we sort of got an explanation in the last accounts review meeting about what the process is to get POs approved. So my question is it realistic that your team, Chris, in Central is going to have the bandwidth to be able to vet all of these?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I can have one person just concentrate on this one piece along with, other duties. Yeah,
Okay.
That's
one
about
piece is-
realigning.
Yeah. This is not this one piece is not a full-time job.
Okay,
No.
thanks.
Moving on, page 25, just textbooks, system-wide. Page 26 is the professional books for staff, system-wide. On page 27A is the start of the utilities breakdown. Breaks out gas, all our emergency maintenance contracts, as well as our preventative maintenance contracts. Electricity as well down at the bottom. And it continues on page 27D with water, sewer, telephone, and our wireless services. Page 28, buildings and grounds system-wide. Landscaping supplies, vehicle maintenance, and all of the equipment, snow blowers, floor spinners, weed whackers, so on and so forth. Page 29, printing services.
Chris, what's a sick bank card?
Isn't it done online now?
Yeah, it's a software. It's a
When you,
okay.
the donate, so unions have an option to have one of their members donate a day
Oh, okay,
beginning
like a
of the year
pool.
to the sick bank, so when somebody needs it, extra days for illness and serious issues, there's a committee that meets, including the presidents of the unions, HR, and they make this decision based on need.
Okay.
And
Yeah, we
it
saw
has stipulations, like how long somebody's been in, the system, the need for obviously unfortunate long-term illnesses and things like that.
Gotcha.
It's been a great thing that the unions have done over several, for as long as I've been here, 30 years. It's been something that has really helped people.
Yeah, okay.
Page 30 starts your breakdown of contract services. So what we changed here, in hopes of transparency, for every vendor we've listed what that vendor supplies to the district. In the past, it's been put together in an aggregate, but I think it's fair for the committee to see it broken out by vendor and what they provide as a service or a product to the district. And this continues for the next 3 pages.
So do we have 2 contracts with Burgess Pest Control? What's Pest Control Services, S, and then I understand BHS. So is one for all of the others?
So, yes, so S stands for system-wide.
Okay, thank you.
See a C sometimes in parentheses, that would be central administration. S is system-wide, and then obviously BHS is BHS.
Thank you.
Are there any questions, contract services?
No.
Okay. Moving on, page 31 are all our rentals and leases. We will not be funding the building at 661 Center Street come 2024. Or the Waite building located on North Main Street, the former bank building. We will continue the rental lease for the Promise School, the Foster Street warehouse, our postage machine, the lobby guard at the high school, as well as the Westgate Drive building. (32A) is a list of all our operational expenses. Including our legal fees, school committee expenditures, auto liability insurance for the attendance officers.
So like, for an example, legal services, and I know Mr. Rodriguez has brought this up, and I agree with him, we need to explore, some savings there with, bringing attorneys in-house, which a lot of big school districts do. So you need a labor attorney, and you also need someone that deals with school law as far as discipline, special ed. So that's something the committee, we can explore
Yeah.
going into next year and looking at, because, when we go into budget season, the bill goes higher. I'm not budget season, negotiations, the
yeah.
bill goes higher and higher. So these are things we have to consider. I know that's been brought up, and that's all. Again, this is the first night of a long process of to decide what to do to save
Yeah.
money. Mr. Rodriguez has a question.
Oh, Mr. Rodriguez.
Chris, what's the auto liability for what is that?
So the attendance officers, they use their own vehicles, so we reimburse them for their auto insurance.
What's the percent? I mean, 1,000? I mean, like, I know I pay more than 1,000 for my insurance for my vehicle. I mean, like,
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't know that.
is it a certain percentage or?
I can go back and look into that for you.
Okay, I mean, wouldn't it be, I mean, we have a transportation department, wouldn't it be suitable utilizing?
Yeah, that's just for them to use their own cars to go from house to house and stuff?
Yes,
Oh, so that's for them to visit homes? And-
correct.
So that's their own cars?
Correct.
So they're not obviously they don't transport kids?
No,
So when they're going from a house to a house, and,
correct.
all right, we'll have to look at that.
Yep.
Yeah, I wish I was paying 1,000. I pay 2,800 for my daughter alone. I mean, like,
I mean, if it's, I'm assuming that, I mean, if they're visiting the homes, then are they using a district vehicle rather than their own personal vehicle?
yeah, that's stuff we can look at. Because they don't have district vehicles, that's for sure.
They use their own personal vehicles.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And operational expenses continues on 32B. Page 33, transportation and travel. Now, again, we're still ramping up our transportation department, so there are still items that we do need to go out to vendor for certain science fairs, field trips, ROTC trips, some community school, after-school programs as well. Internal mail delivery, that's from school to school mail delivery, as well as in-state travel and superintendent travel, which
I don't,
he
you
never
can
goes
take
anywhere,
that out.
so you can cut that too.
I don't go anywhere. There's 6,000 back.
I know.
Page 34, out of district tuitions. We have collaborative private day schools, residential, and nursing home. Schools under SPED at a cost of just shy of $10 million.
And this has gone up. It's just, this is something, obviously, we're seeing with mental health being such a crisis. If we have to send a student out of district, it's for very serious reasons. It's either a very serious safety concern for either the child or others. It's also some students that just need not all about behavior, and it's about, physical, if they have some disability that requires a school, this is where we're hoping to see the state. I know Governor Healy put in a appendix or addendum to her budget for this, so
addendum,
there's
that
an
was the word
addendum
we
to her. That hasn't been finalized, so there's an addendum to help all districts, so the Mass Association of School Superintendents has been really pushing, because every district is seeing a huge increase in out-of-district placement costs because of the mental health crisis. So every district's saying, you gotta help us here, because the tuition is 14% more for those private schools. It's gone up 14%. And also the transportation costs, like there's just no control in them. So I know there's an addendum. Hopefully that gets passed where we see some relief in that area.
Because really, out of the whole budget, the tuitions, especially the SPED tuitions, are so hard to pinpoint and so hard to budget for. That's where our contingency budget comes in, to try to cover some of those costs that we couldn't possibly plan for. So the cost will just continue to go up, just like everything else.
Yeah, that's not gonna stop.
Page 35, technology. And there is no cut to technology, just like all other programs. Technology obviously is the wave of the future, so we know the movement. Page 36, facilities maintenance. Pretty clear, glass, roofs, masonry work, paving, lighting, so on and so forth, system-wide. And page 37, again, this is, I brought up our contingency, just for the fact of tuitions alone, we need some sort of contingency to cover costs that are just unknown to us. With that and with some transportation costs as well related to SPED tuitions, so. And 38 is just travel out of state for BA members and administration. Which then leads us to our non-net budget. Again, this is the breakdown that you saw on page 1, just itemized. And then as you move to 41, it breaks it down by position. And as you notice on page 41, our bus drivers, obviously, we've hired a number of bus drivers to meet the needs of the district, so you'll see a sizable increase there, as well as we negotiated their contract, which obviously there was an increase there as well. And lastly is just the ordinary maintenance under the transportation department. This is all the homeless transportation, in-district transportation, as well as all their supply and contracted items.
And we are trying to, I think, how many 7D vans do we have now? 4?
5.
5. So we've been looking for, so most of the outside companies that we have to contract for out-of-district transportation or out-of-district special ed transportation, we have to use private companies, and there's 7D. It doesn't require a CDL that you see. It's more of the minivans that you see running. So we've been trying to purchase those to hire our own 7D drivers to kind of start to bring that cost down. The issue is it's very difficult to find a nice used van now that's going to last, that doesn't have 200,000 miles on it. So Chris.
Honestly, the newer ones were cheaper than buying a used.
Right.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. I have a question here. On the transportation, it went from 63.3 for dispatches to 297. So I'm just trying to, this is a deeper conversation, is, we had First Student, when I looked at them, I believe they only had 2 dispatches, and they were providing service to the school district, and I'm just questioning, why do we need 4 or 5 dispatches when they're providing the same amount of service? That doesn't add up, and that's a huge jump from 63 to almost 300,000.
Correct. And I've asked that same question
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
part of the,
Yep, that's part of the realignment of that. It's a new department, Mr. Rodriguez, so I've asked that question, and we are working to schedule these positions properly. But again, this is a work in progress, and I agree with you. I question that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's concerning to me. I don't know how my colleagues, but that's a huge jump. Knowing that First Student only had 2 dispatches, why do we need 4 or 5?
So one thing to note, that when that was funded in '23, that was underfunded. So that there was nothing to go by on that department, right? So that item was underfunded, the same as the data specialist. That was underfunded. If you notice, that went from 52.7 to 191. That was, in my opinion, a few of those were lowballed. We just didn't know what those costs would be. Now we know what those costs will be in '24. Again, there are some items that we do need to realign, but we will check.
these are projected.
Yeah. Yep.
But part of the whole discussion about non-certified staffing.
Thank you.
And that concludes the proposed budget presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
So just before, obviously we take more questions, but the next step is, we will come to you with actual numbers of suggested reductions in staff with the hard numbers. We can't really put names on what we do, and I can't talk now because some of these departments are smaller. So when you're talking about reduction in some of these departments, you're actually identifying people without having the respect of actually talking to them. And so that's why we'll do that over the next week. And then, on the second, we'll have to have an approved vote for the number of reductions, and, we'll give you an idea of where they're coming from.
And will that be, so once we vote, we'll have hard numbers that we know are exactly what we need to do?
Right.
So, okay.
Because you have to look at, again, all those 150 positions, that's not all classroom positions. That's administration, that's changing some jobs around to make an elimination. Administrators picking up extra duties to save classroom positions. So those, there's a good amount in there that will be through administration. And then you talk about the smaller departments where those cuts are coming from, which need to be made as well under the non-certified.
Gotcha.
And then obviously that's to hit the deadline of May 15th, and again, we work on this all the way through June 30th, pretty much. We have a May 15th deadline for certified staff,
Yep.
and we have for RIFs, and we have a June 1st for all others.
Gotcha. Any questions? I do have one question. So I understand that we're going to get hard numbers by Tuesday, but if we have any questions specifically about this in regards to areas that we think might, I would love to ask you right now, Chris, like where you see, sometimes when you put the data together, you're analyzing it just because of the fact that you're populating it, and so you can see trends. Is there any?
Yeah, I would go through it all. If you see stuff in here that basically that's, but we got to caution, like what we used to do
Yeah.
is when we had those years, 6 straight years of cutting $60 million, we'd go through ordinary maintenance and cut a lot of things, and then would put it back towards positions.
Yep.
Because they were needed because of the enrollment was there. So you'd cut 300,000 out of technology. I think some years we didn't have laptops when we went into remote because we cut it every year to save people, rightfully so, because you had the numbers to support the staff. But you got to remember that's a one-time cut. So we can cut that and decide where we put it, but the only thing I caution is, and again, I'm the one that added the 383 people, so I don't like seeing people get cut.
Yeah.
The issue is, when you do a one-time cut in a material or a curriculum or a piece of technology, we used to just then hire people back with it, and that's why you can't sustain.
Yeah.
Without the enrollment, we can't sustain those numbers. So to stabilize, I'm fine with cutting what we think could be cut for stuff, but where we put that is important to
Yeah,
to help
absolutely.
stabilize. So I'm open to any obviously, your budget that,
And again,
this is our suggestions, and
yeah.
you make a decision where we need to go and what we need to look at, cut.
In the past, when we've had tough years, and I've been through several, there's been a sentiment with some individuals where everybody needs to feel the pain across the board, where they don't really focus on the problem, right? Our problem is our low enrollment and our staffing levels not meeting that enrollment. So staying focused on that, as much as I don't want to see people lose their jobs, that's not what I'm looking to do, but it does not make sense to cut, say, $500,000 out of supplies to save a few jobs that we're not going to be able to afford in 2 years. Like, this will sustain us through the next 4 to 5 years.
No, that understood. Thank you.
And again, it's about, and we'll come to you again, I'm looking at every angle. It's like administration, people that are administrators that, basically we have to redesign jobs to save money as well. There's all the transportation now that's new, and we've run it for a full, 2 years, 1 year, half, this year full, and like, where do we make changes there that save? Because, we've done it now for a full year, and pretty much, we still don't know everything, but there are places there that we can look at, obviously.
Cost savings.
Yeah, for savings, and I just caution, like, when we used to do it, and we did it every year, I remember Superintendent Malone sent 500 pink slips out one year, and we end up losing about 20 people.
Yeah, just
I don't know why he did that, was something to do with politics. And just to put people through that, like sending them a pink slip and telling them they don't have a job, and then telling them before June 30th that they're hired back. First of all, it's not humane.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's just not feasible to continue, that's why we have to maintain the focus on enrollment. And again, I'm the one that added the 383. I was superintendent 2019 and, added, and rightfully so. And last year I rolled the dice hoping our enrollment would go up. But we'll still continue to look at, out of this 150, how many are there through people resigning, because we still have people that are resigning, retirements, and where those positions are leaving, because some, okay, you have 40 retirements, there's 40, you can't do it that way, because you can do some of them, but if it's a
needed
teacher of students
position.
with disabilities, or
Yeah.
if it's a specialized science teacher, or math teacher, or French, or foreign language, where you can't find, or ESL, where it's very difficult to find those positions, it's okay, that person's leaving, but they have to be replaced because you need.
Yeah, understood. It's
Yeah.
a specialized role.
Right.
I know you've talked about this before, and so I just want to bring it up again. What about right-sizing the population in each classroom?
Well, you have to stay low in especially K-2. So that was definitely something that Karen Spalding has been focused on, because, K-2, also 3 should stay pretty low, and then we have to look at class sizes higher than that when you get to the upper grades, because we're pretty low even at the upper grades, and, we have to look at that.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions or comments, reflections?
And I'd love to keep it low, but
Yeah, agreed, agreed,
let's just hope kids come back.
right?
And just to reiterate, the reason why this took longer is we wanted to be sure that we were giving you firm numbers, especially when it comes to staff reductions.
And we were hoping for the 6.7 million in the 69 kids.
I bet,
We don't
yeah.
take that lightly, as well as, normally when the House comes in with their budget, we were hoping for another 1.4 million, 1.2 million. That didn't come to fruition, and I'm not going to hold my breath that the Senate's going to come with anything, and they normally don't. So there's not going to be any Hail Mary. There's not going to be this influx of money that we've had in the past.
Yeah, the biggest thing we're looking at is there's a couple of bills. One is for mostly would only help about 162 communities that really got a very small increase in their Chapter 70. That was pretty much a lot of towns around us that,
Yeah.
Not urbans.
not urbans, yeah. So there's something that's floated that they're looking to maybe fund them a little bit more. And the out-of-district placement costs, that's the big one that we hope gets passed, because that will help us. But that's just going to help us offset what we're already spending.
Yeah.
And what we will be spending, because we're going to try to do more stuff in-house, but again, some of the needs are so, we continue to have this conversation with Desi, is that, we understand, but we are not a mental health institution, and it's kind of, to make kids suffer, to save money to keep them in district when they need an out-of-district placement. It's a give and take, and
Yeah.
you hope that there is something pending. I think there's a bill about mental health and for schools, especially K-12, and I forget who put it in. I read it today, to hope to put more money towards that, which hopefully you would get, and you would be able to, maybe pick up salaries of adjustment counselors and psychologists. So if something like that goes through, that hopefully will help us as well,
Gotcha,
because there is a crisis.
yeah. There is. Okay, so we don't have to vote on anything. This is more of a FYI of where we're headed in terms of some of the cuts, adjustments that we need to make in the district. Are there any more questions, any more clarifications that anybody needs before we close out the meeting.
And like Chris is available, I mean, come in during the week and,
Yeah.
Yep. I'm happy to sit down with anyone, go through the budget again, answer any of your questions.
Yeah.
And I can speak, Aldo would, make himself available as well.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and again, this is a whole work in progress to the end of June.
I should have mentioned this about 15 minutes ago, but Mr. Tim Sullivan joined us about 20 minutes ago to replace the mayor, so welcome.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Rodriguez?
Just a comment. I mean, this is, disheartening to, just to, have to vote on a budget to, pink slip, educators where we know that's where it's needed. I know we're gonna look top to bottom to see where we can, save to make sure we keep the educators in the classroom, coming from the district that we are and the students that we cater to. It's just like, how did we get here? We have to do a better job of getting these kids back into Brockton Public Schools. I know we have some marketing materials that we're working on. I mean, just by looking at this, I mean, I've already made cuts in my head of where I would want to, slash some funds, and I'll sit down with you and Aldo and give you my feedback, and hopefully everybody else does the same. More eyes than one, obviously. So it's disheartening.
I concur, Mr. Rodriguez, I really do. It is disheartening, and, Ms. Azak, she's not here tonight, but she's been warning us about this for a while now, and so about how difficult it was, before the ESSER monies, before the additional monies that we had, and so they're tough times with tough decisions, and like you, I'm going to go through this and take a look and see and send my questions to Chris to see if there's opportunity, just opportunity anywhere to sort of turn the ship around. But in the interest of complete transparency, I think at this point here, it's like we're going to have to do pink slips, but let's see if there's other cost-cutting measures that we can put through that might help against that, but I don't necessarily think, we're going to be able to make up 262 positions, which I think was the most surprising to me. But if we balance this budget and it does hold us and stabilize us for the next 4 or 5 years, it does allow us to gain ground, but it's still going to sting a lot this year. Anyone else? Mr. Homer?
Just a quick question. At this point in the year, do we know, are our schools staffed? Are they fully staffed, or are there still positions that still
some
didn't
open.
get filled?
Yeah.
There were still that didn't get filled this year?
Yeah, and we'll figure out which ones don't need to be filled, which will be part of this number.
Okay. Is there, I hate to put you on the spot with this one. I didn't think of this before this meeting to ask, but is there do you have a rough idea of where those
I
vacancies
think
are?
most of the openings are foreign language. We still have math openings. We still have openings in ESL, and some special education openings as well. So that's where you have to look at which ones, they've been filled by long-term subs.
Right.
So it's basically which ones can you
So
cut? And
Yeah.
and it's, again, if it's not really a specialized and it's something that where there's low class size and you can get a position there out of the open positions, or people resigning, will do that.
So it sounds like a lot of those positions are kind of like what would be certified personnel positions.
Yes, correct.
In those
Yep.
classroom ones there.
Yeah, and there's, I think there's still a good, maybe 40 open paraprofessional positions that haven't been filled.
Correct. But one thing, and I'll caution this, this is realigning our staffing levels, but we also have to reallocate our resources across the district because I believe there's some issues that they're not allocated properly. So there could be open positions, but we may be able to move people around the district to fill those positions.
Yeah, that's the point that
Right.
I was trying to think about was cutting the positions. Does it mean cutting people that are currently working in a full-time position versus somebody that's subbing in there right
Might
now?
not, yeah, you might be able to
So-
do,
Correct.
where you're
Just-
cutting a permanent sub rather than
Yeah, so I know it's
person.
probably not 260 people that are subbing in these
Right.
empty seats or something like that, but it may not feel the full impact of 260 people
Correct.
losing. Okay.
And there could be some class sizes that 2 classes could be combined. You know, there is a lot of variations here. It's not, you know, and we've taken that into account as well when we put these numbers together. We're not just throwing these numbers out. We have been looking district-wide of how we can move things around, and we're confident that this number, like, again, there are cuts that you may think that you'd want to make to reduce those amount of pink slips. And we're happy to take those suggestions and discuss it, but it's not about just realigning, it's about reallocating the resources and really cleaning our house. So,
Well, I'm sure, Chris, first of all, thank you, because doing this presentation and delivering news like this is always difficult.
that's why Aldo's not here, right? So,
Yeah, he's in his triathlon or. So I appreciate the level of detail to be able to allow us to go line by line and see if there is any opportunity that I'm not saying you or Aldo missed, but maybe didn't consider. And so for that, I appreciate to give us the visibility if there's an area that, you know, we want to look into for more questions. So thank you.
we're open, yep, absolutely, 100%, thank you.
Anyone else, or I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, properly motioned by Ms. Sullivan and Mr. Rodriguez, and can I get a show of hands? Okay, adjourned. Thank you, Thomas.